He zip-tied Chuck Norris to the concrete, then threw his wife to the ground right in front of him. He simply said 5 words, 5 chilling words that made an entire SWAT unit freeze in place. But before we unravel what happened, drop your location in the comments. Horse here. And if this story grabs you, hit that subscribe button. Oakwood Hills, 4:17 p.m. Tuesday. The screech of tires didn't belong on this quiet suburban street. Chuck wiped engine grease off his fingers just as a matte black SUV cut across his driveway. A second vehicle boxed him in from behind. And a third. Fourth, doors burst open. Heavy boots thundered against asphalt. Barked orders tore through the silence. Police, down, on the ground. Chuck stepped out from under Mrs. Henderson's Buick, blinking into the sudden glare. A socket wrench dangled from his hand, still warm from 30 minutes of work. One of the men, draped in full tactical gear, leveled a rifle at his chest. Drop it! On your knees! Hands where we can see them. Chuck didn't argue. The wrench fell from his grip with a dull clink. The air turned thick, charged with adrenaline and confusion. Half a dozen black-armored figures stormed his yard, visors down, shields raised. Red laser dots danced along the siding of his home. Chuck lowered himself to the ground, calm and deliberate like it was second nature. Because for him, it was. Another voice barked. Rough hands yanked his arms backward. Zip ties cinched tight, biting into his skin. Chuck didn't resist. You're making a mistake, he muttered. Oh. Hoots circled like wolves, radios crackled, a surveillance drone buzzed overhead. Across the street, a neighbor stood frozen with a garden hose, recording the chaos with shaking hands. Then came the man in charge, the team leader, his uniform marked with stripes. This your property? He demanded. Chuck nodded slowly from the ground. Been mine 27 years. You go by Charles Norris. Some folks call me Chuck. The team leader didn't blink. Where's Carlos Mendez? Chuck tilted his head slightly. You've got the wrong man. The butt of a rifle dug into his shoulder. This is 4,588 Oakwood Drive, the officer snapped. Are you sure you want to lie to us? Chuck didn't respond. Down the block, a silver sedan rounded the corner. His heart sank. Gina, she always drove slow, careful. Through the windshield, he saw her frown at the wall of black SUVs. She pulled to a cautious stop. 2 grocery bags sat buckled in the passenger seat. She stepped out, apples in one arm, milk and eggs in the other. 3 SWAT officers turned. Drop the bags. Hands up. Gina froze halfway to the porch. What's going on? She asked, voice shaking. And now, ma'am. Final warning. She tried to comply, but her movement was too slow. A taser cracked through the air like a whip. The voltage shrieked. Her body seized. Groceries scattered. Milk exploded. Apples rolled down the driveway like marbles. She hit the pavement with a hollow thud. Gina! Chuck lurched, but a boot slammed into his spine, pinning him in place. Stay down, old man. The team closed in on her, weapons still drawn. A non-compliant subject neutralized. One officer radioed in. Chuck didn't flinch, didn't scream. He just breathed, slow and cold, like a man taking inventory of a storm before it breaks. Then he raised his head, not toward the rookie who fired, or the men with shaky hands. He locked eyes with the commander. And in a voice that could slice glass, he spoke 5 words, a call general roar. Right now. The shift in the air was instant. The team leader stiffened. One younger officer scoffed. That's supposed to scare us? Chuck didn't move. I'm done talking, he said. Call him or own this mistake. The commander hesitated. Behind them, Gina groaned weakly on the ground. One apple tapped against Chuck's boot and stopped. Then Chuck added one more sentence. Quiet, deadly, a whisper with the weight of a verdict. This isn't your op anymore. And just like that, the bravado drained from the scene. For the first time since the SUVs arrived, no one moved. Oakwood Hills, 20 p.m. His name echoed through the radios like a jolt of lightning. A call general roar. Chuck lay bound, still pinned to the concrete, but now it wasn't Chuck on the floor. It was the entire unit standing on a trap they didn't see coming. Commander D. Badge number 6142 hovered above him, jaw tight. General who? Chuck didn't answer. He didn't have to. His eyes said enough. A grizzled operator paused mid-step. Sweat rolled down his temple beneath his helmet. "Wait," he muttered. "Did he say roar?" Mercer's lip curled. Mercer's lip curled. You think name-dropping scares me? This is a red-level narcotics raid. Federal coordination. Chuck's tone didn't shift. Calm. Unforgiving. We're not on Oakwood Avenue. The words hit like a detonator. Mercer blinked. What? Oh, this is Oakwood Drive. Different zip code. Well, behind them, one of the younger SWAT members frantically tapped at his wrist-mounted tablet. He paled. "A commander," he said, slow and unsure. "We might have a location mismatch." "Might?" Mercer barked. "Sir, this house belongs to Charles Norris. No aliases. No criminal record. No known ties to the Mendades cartel." Denny hesitated. "What?" Mercer snapped. The operator's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His background check just bounced. His voice faltered. A full lockout. Clearance level. Unknown. The words hung in the air like a trigger on the edge of snapping. Mercer's feet didn't move. For the first time since the assault began, he was the one frozen. Chuck slowly exhaled. Not a sigh, not fatigue. A countdown. "I need to check on my wife." No one answered. "She has a heart condition," Chuck said, more forcefully now. "Oh, man could have killed her." Mercer's eyes dropped to Gina. She lay still, her blouse soaked in milk and sweat. Her chest rose and fell uneven and shallow. Chuck's voice cut sharper. Right now, an older SWAT operator leaned in, whispering into Mercer's ear. "Sir, maybe we should listen to him." Mercer clenched his jaw. "For not cutting restraints, we are not—" Chuck interrupted, crisp and cold. A left inside pocket. "My jacket. Reach in. Look, but don't touch." Mercer's eyes narrowed. He crouched, slowly, one hand resting on the grip of his sidearm like a safety net. He reached inside the jacket. Then he stopped breathing. His gloved fingers closed around a cold, worn piece of metal. He pulled it free. A badge, small, dull from time, but unmistakable. A black eagle, wings outstretched, 2 lightning bolts arcing from its talons. Gripped in its claws, a classified emblem no civilian should ever see. Mercer stared at it like he was holding a live grenade. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. The older operator took 2 quick steps back, eyes wide. That's Terror 1? That's Black Protocol clearance." Mercer's voice cracked. "That's what?" The operator's voice dropped to a reverent murmur. One of the rookies leaned forward. "Him who?" The older man didn't blink. "That's Chuck Norris." Silence collapsed over the scene like a thunderclap. Even the neighborhood kids hiding behind hedges stopped recording. Chuck turned his head. "Cut the restraints." Mercer stood frozen, badge still in hand like it might detonate. Gina let out a low groan. Her legs trembled. Her eyes fluttered open and rolled before settling on Chuck. His voice deepened, commanding, absolute. Wasn't the badge. It was the man who just dropped the wife of someone who used to teach your top brass how to breach a door and walk away breathing. He paused, eyes locked on Mercer. Then finally he gave a tiny nod. A SWAT operator rushed forward, trauma shears in hand. The zip ties snapped clean. Chuck sat up slowly. Not stiff, not dazed. He moved like a man who hadn't aged a day, steady and precise. He rubbed his wrists, rolled to his feet, then dropped beside Gina. He slid an arm under her head. "Easy, darling. I've got you," he whispered. She winced. Her voice cracked. "But Chuck." "Oh, what happened?" Chuck didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Mercer. "A mistake," he said flatly. "A preventable one." The medic arrived, kit clattering open beside them. Chuck allowed the pulse check, but kept his hand wrapped around hers. Across the yard, another officer scrambled on the radio. "Dispatch, we've got a bad address. I repeat, 1029, mismatch. Confirmed suspect Mendades is last known." The response came back, distorted but clear. The subject moved out of 4588 Oakwood Avenue 3 months ago. 3 months? Mercer closed his eyes. The weight of failure hit him like a slab of concrete. Chuck rose, slow but towering. His posture didn't change, but now he stood taller than anyone on that lawn. "You escalated without confirming," he said. "You entered without verifying. You fired without thinking." "Oh!" And you zip-tied the man who wrote your playbook. Mercer tried to form words, but Chuck wasn't done. You didn't neutralize a threat today. You violated a home. You dropped a senior citizen holding groceries. And you did it all on the wrong zip code. Visors came off. Shame clung to them like sweat. Chuck knelt by Gina, brushing damp hair from her face. We're getting you inside now, sweetheart. She gave a faint nod. Chuck looked over his shoulder. Your team stays outside. Mercer opened his mouth to protest. Chuck didn't raise his voice. Someone better call General Roar, because the next person who walks up my driveway better outrank you. Oakwood Hills, 4:46 p.m. No sirens, no warning, just the soft crunch of tires rolling over pavement. A final black SUV crept up the street like a specter, pulling in behind the command vehicle with deliberate calm. It had no markings, no lights, just a government plate. The windows didn't care who was watching. The driver's door opened. Out stepped a man in a charcoal gray suit. No tie. No insignia. Just presence sharp enough to slice through the tension like a scalpel. General James Roar, silver hair trimmed to perfection, posture forged in war. His eyes swept the yard like a battlefield assessment, cataloging damage, noting weakness, measuring failure. He didn't speak. Mercer approached. 2 steps in, he already looked like a cadet. Sir, Roar brushed past him without a glance. Chuck stood in the doorway, framed in peeling white trim. One arm braced against the doorframe. The other cradled Gina, wrapped in a blanket, eyes closed but breathing now. Steady. Roar reached the porch steps. The 2 men stared at each other. No salute yet, just time, history, and wait. Then Roar exhaled and raised his hand in a crisp, clean motion. A salute, not out of protocol, out of something deeper. Chuck didn't respond at first. Then, with deliberate precision, he returned it. For the first time in 15 years, Roar dropped his hand. His voice came low, edged in steel. They told me you were dead. Chuck's reply barely moved his lips. Only professionally. Behind them, the SWAT team shifted, helmets off, eyes lowered, weapons limp at their sides. Roar turned and surveyed the entire yard like he was about to deliver a ruling from a military tribunal. He pointed to Chuck. This man wrote the protocols you just violated. The rules you were trained to follow. The standards you failed to uphold. Roar let the weight of his words hang heavy in the air. Mercer took a cautious step forward, trying to recover authority. Sir, we had intel. You had assumptions. Roar snapped, his voice slicing clean through Mercer's defense. Well, you had a warrant for a man who vacated the premises 3 months ago. That's the problem. She looked up at him. And you? Did they see you? Chuck didn't answer. The envelope still sat on the side table, unopened, untouched. Gina followed his gaze to it. You're not even going to read it? I don't need to. It's your work, Chuck. Your life. They're asking you to come back. Chuck's voice was calm but final. Oh no, they're asking for a weapon. Gina looked at him fully now. The man, the myth, the quiet storm. You were always more than that. Chuck stood and picked up the envelope, turned it over in his hand, heavy with history. Full of power. I used to think fixing the world meant fighting its wars, he said. Oh, now I think it means teaching some stubborn 16-year-old how to rebuild a carburetor and not give up when he fails the first time. Gina's smile returned, soft and proud. You're still doing more good than half the people in Washington. Chuck chuckled. He walked the envelope to the kitchen and placed it on the counter. Not in the trash, not hidden away. Just aside, maybe for the fire pit, maybe not. He pulled back the curtain. The sun was beginning to drop. Gold spilled across the lawn. A cruiser rolled by, slower now. The officer behind the wheel paused, glanced at the house, and gave a respectful nod, then moved on. Chuck didn't wave, just watched. I want to be a symbol, he said softly. You're not, Gina replied. You're a reminder. Chuck turned to her. A reminder of what? A stillness isn't weakness. That silence isn't blindness. And that strength, as she said, it doesn't always have to shout. The clock ticked behind them. The tools in the garage lay untouched. The weight of what had happened would never vanish completely. But tonight the storm had passed, and Chuck Norris was still standing. He didn't wait for applause. He just handed the officer a clean rag and nodded toward the driver's seat. "Try it now." The young cop slid in, turned the key, and the engine roared to life like it had just remembered what it was built for. Relief flooded the kid's face. "Thank you, sir." Chuck gave a nod, already wiping his hands on an old towel. "Don't call me sir, I'm not your officer. I'm not your officer, I'm just your neighbor." The kid blinked at that. Something in his stance shifted. Less tension, more weight in the moment. "Still," he said, "you saved a lot more than just this engine." Chuck didn't answer. He didn't need to. The kid understood something unspoken. The man standing in front of him wasn't some legend in a headline. He was real. Grounded. And he chose stillness over fire. That night, Chuck walked through the garage in the soft hush of early dusk. He passed the workbench, the oil-stained floor, the wall of tools he'd once wielded like weapons. Outside, wind stirred the chimes on the porch. The air smelled like rain was thinking about coming. "Still sealed, still heavy." He stared at it a long time. Then, without ceremony, he opened the wood stove, laid it inside, and shut the iron door with a quiet finality. No anger, no fanfare, just closure. The next morning, Gina found a note on the fridge. "Hardware store. Back by noon. Love you," she smiled as she read it. Not because of the words, but because of what they meant. Life wasn't made up of grand gestures and explosive moments. It was the quiet decision to keep building after everything had tried to tear you down. Across town, Principal Everett met with the school board. We've had requests pouring in for guest lectures, defense experts, veterans, even politicians. They want to be part of the program now. Ride Chuck's wave. Everett shook his head. They don't get it. Chuck doesn't want to be a wave. He wants to be a shore. Back at the house, Chuck returned just as the rain started, stepping inside with a bag of screws, a new garden hose, and a copy of Popular Mechanics. Gina glanced up from the couch. "You forget the eggs again?" Chuck grinned. "I didn't forget. I just didn't like how they looked." She laughed, the sound light and familiar. "A perfectionist. A discerning," he corrected, placing the bag on the counter. The days that followed were simple. The porch got repainted. The garden shed door no longer stuck. Neighbors passed slower in their cars, sometimes stopping to wave. And though no press vans came anymore, though the world had moved on to fresher outrage, the impact lingered. Like good steel, forged once, tested forever. At the Tanner County Sheriff's Office, a new policy was printed and taped to the door of every squad car locker. A protocol begins with presence. Presence begins with restraint. Below it in smaller print, a beloved protocol inside the Norris home one evening, Chuck stood beside the window, watching as dusk settled over Oakwood Hills. Gina joined him, her fingers intertwining with his. "Whore!" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Just watched as a pair of kids rode past on bikes, laughing carefree. "Finally," he nodded. "I didn't change the world," he said. "No," she agreed. "But you reminded it." He turned to her, a slight smile breaking the years on his face, that it doesn't take noise to be heard. And so the house remained, a little quieter, a little stronger, with groceries on the shelf, grease on the hands, and a strength that didn't shout, but stood, still, rooted, unshaken. Dochi took it slowly, brows furrowing. "What is this?" The officer just nodded once. "He said you'd know." The cruiser rolled on, tires humming softly over sun-warmed pavement. Gina watched it disappear, then looked down at the package in her hands. It was small, heavy, and silent in a way that carried weight beyond its size. Inside the house, she laid it on the kitchen table and called out, "Chuck?" He stepped in from the garage, wiping his hands with a rag, his brow arching when he saw her expression. "What's that?" She pushed the package toward him. "A delivery. No address, no name. Just this." Chuck looked at the wax seal, his face unreadable, then slowly broke it. Inside, a single item, a challenge coin, blackened and worn, etched with Latin on one side and a call sign on the other. Beneath it, a handwritten note. "You never left the field. You just changed the terrain." Then set the coin down and quietly folded the note. Gina studied his face. That from the one who gave the order?" Chuck shook his head. "From the one who could have but didn't. A beat passed." "You gonna answer?" she asked. He reached for the coin again, turning it once in his fingers. "Already did," he murmured. "That day on the concrete." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the tree line, casting long gold streaks over Oakwood Drive, the house stood still. No news vans, no viral hashtags, just a porch light flicking on, a couple mugs set down gently. Chuck looked out across the street where a new boy roughed bike in slow loops, just close enough to be seen, just far enough not to intrude. Gina followed his gaze. "You think he'll ask again?" Chuck smirked. "I think he won't have to." And with that, they sat in the quiet. Two people who had once seen the worst of the world and chose, every single day since, to be something better. Not louder, not stronger, just better. She opened it slowly. Inside, a signed photo of a much younger Chuck, flanked by men in camo. Faces blurred. In the corner, a handwritten note. "We never forgot. And now the world knows too." Gina smiled softly, tucking the photo against her chest. "Oh, old fool," she whispered. Chuck appeared behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Something I should know about." She turned and held out the photo. He looked at it for a long moment, then simply, "Ha!" And that was that. 3 months later. Early autumn, Oakwood Hills. A patrol cruiser sputtered once, then died. The rookie officer inside slammed the steering wheel. Steam curled up from under the hood. His frustration twisted into disbelief. "Of course," he muttered. He reached for the radio clipped to his vest, but stopped. Looked up. There it was. The house at the end of the street. Wide porch. Stacked firewood. A rusted garage sign that read, "No repairs, just respect." He didn't even need to call it in. The garage door was already sliding open. Chuck Norris stepped out, socket wrench in one hand, black coffee in the other. "I heard a cough," he said. "I figured it wasn't you." The young officer chuckled sheepish. "The engine's fried. Patrol's gonna kill me if I call it in." Chuck took one glance at the cruiser. Alternators loose. "You've got maybe 8 minutes of battery left before you're on foot." The kid blinked. "You serious?" Chuck didn't answer. He walked over and popped the hood. Steam hissed like a curtain rising. He leaned in, calm, sure. Tapped the housing, turned a bolt, checked the belt tension. Muttered something about a rookie mechanics at Central Supply. The officer shifted awkwardly, then blurted out, Chuck didn't look up. "It depends on the question. Why didn't you fight back that day?" Chuck paused, just half a second, then kept working. The question didn't surprise him anymore, but it never got easier to answer. "You had the training," the kid continued. You had the right. I mean, if it were me and they'd done that to my wife." Chuck tightened the bolt. Click. "You're not me," he said. The kid flushed. "I know, people talk about that day like it's legend." Chuck wiped his hands, then finally looked him in the eye. "You want the truth?" The officer straightened, yo. "Yes, sir." Chuck leaned back on the frame of the cruiser. "I didn't fight back because 5 words were louder than fear. Because sometimes the strongest position isn't the one where you're standing over someone. It's the one where you're still standing when everything else tells you to fall." The kid said nothing. Chuck took a long sip from his mug. "They tossed my wife in front of me. They zip-tied me to my own driveway. But I wasn't angry." He set the mug down gently on the hood. "I was disappointed. Because I built part of that system. I trained men like them to be better." And they forgot. Behind them, the cruiser clicked. Dashboard lights flickered back to life. Chuck had reconnected a line while talking. Quiet, precise, efficient. The rookie stared at him, humbled. "You could have ended careers that day," he whispered. Chuck nodded once. "I could have." "We didn't you?" Chuck's voice was low. "Because revenge doesn't fix engines, and it doesn't fix people either." The officer stood in silence. Then slowly he removed his cap and extended a hand. "Well, thank you, Mr. Norris." Chuck looked at the hand and shook it. Briefly. "Just Chuck," he said. The cruiser started on the first try. Later that week, VFW Hall, Oakwood Hills. The scent of brewed coffee, old varnish and memory filled the air. Chuck stepped inside. Familiar faces nodded. Men with canes, prosthetic limbs. 1,000-yard stares softened by weekly stories. The jukebox buzzed with an off-pitch Willie Nelson tune. No one mentioned the video, or the headlines, or the mayor's plaque that arrived in Chuck's mailbox last week. Instead, they welcomed him the same way they always had: a nod, a seat, a cup already poured. He hadn't come for applause. He came because some men carry medals in drawers. Others carry them in silence. After the meeting, a young reporter caught him in the parking lot. Sharp suit, mic already rolling. Mr. Norris, do you have a statement for the public? Something you'd like to say about the day everything changed? Chuck paused beside his old red truck. Tailgate creaky. Military base decal peeling at the corner. He met the reporter's eye. Some men raise their voice to prove they're strong, he said. Others prove it by never needing to. Then he climbed in and drove home. Back on Oakwood Drive, Gina was in the yard tending wildflowers, purple asters in full bloom. The porch light behind her glowed like a halo. Chuck pulled in, killed the engine, sat a moment watching her move gently between the blossoms. He didn't need to say anything. He never really had to. That night on the porch under skies salted with stars, Gina turned to him. Do you think people will remember you for what happened? And Chuck smiled faintly. I don't need them to. She leaned her head on his shoulder. After a long silence, he whispered, I'd rather be remembered by one kid who didn't reach for his weapon than 1,000 who only remember my name. The wind stirred. Crickets sang. And just like that, the world kept spinning, quietly, deliberately, like a man who had already done enough.